During my mom's emergency surgery, my husband called. Leave the hospital and get to my sister's dinner. Now. My dad heard every word. It wasn't the first time. He looked at me with a slow smile and said, tell him to come pick you up himself. An hour later, my husband walked through that hospital door, and the color drained from his face because the surgery had been going for 3 hours when Marcus called. I was sitting in the waiting room of St. Catherine's Medical Center with my father, both of us in the specific suspended state of people who are waiting for news that has not come yet and cannot come fast enough. My mother had gone in at 7 that evening with what the ER doctor had described as a ruptured appendix, which he had said quickly and with the practiced urgencies of someone who needed me to understand the severity without panicking. And I had understood both things simultaneously and had been sitting in this waiting room since then, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and watching my father's hands on his knees. My father's hands were still. Jim Calloway had hands that told you things about his state of mind. When he was relaxed, they were open. When he was worried, they were flat on his thighs, very still, like he was pressing something down. They had been flat and still since we sat down. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Marcus. I picked up because I always picked up. That was one of the things I had learned early in our marriage, that not picking up produced consequences that were worse than whatever the call contained, and the calculus of that had become so automatic that I no longer noticed I was doing it. Where are you? His voice had the specific quality it got when he already knew the answer and was asking the question anyway to establish something. The hospital, I said. Mom is in surgery. I told you that at 6. Diane's dinner starts in 45 minutes, he said. You need to leave now to make it. I looked at my father's hands on his knees. Marcus, my mother is in emergency surgery. She's not going anywhere, he said. Your dad is there. There's nothing you can do sitting in a waiting room. Diane has been planning this dinner for a month and your absence is going to be noticed. I'm not leaving, I said. Nora. His voice shifted into the register I knew. The one that was not quite a threat but was structured exactly like one. The one that said I am being very patient with you and that patience has a limit. I need you at that dinner. Your mother is in good hands. Get in your car. I looked at my father. My father was looking at me. He had heard everything. Our chairs were close together, and Marcus's voice carried, and my father had heard every word, and his face had done something I had never seen it do before, which was go very quiet, in a way that was different from his usual quiet. This was the quiet of a man who has just had something confirmed that he had been trying not to believe. Tell him to come pick you up himself, my father said, quietly, with a slow smile that did not reach his eyes. I looked at my father for a moment. Then I said, into the phone, if you need me there that badly, come pick me up. The silence on Marcus's end lasted exactly 3 seconds. What? I said, come pick me up. I said, if Diane's dinner is that important, drive here and get me. I'll be in the waiting room. He hung up. My father looked at his hands. I looked at the cold coffee in mine. The waiting room was quiet around us. The particular muffled quiet of hospital spaces, other families in other chairs, with their own suspended states and their own cold coffees. A television on the wall was showing something with the sound off. How long, my father said, not a complete question. He did not need to finish it. 6 years, I said. He nodded slowly. He did not say I knew or I could tell, or any of the things people say when they have been watching something for a long time, and have finally been given permission to acknowledge it. He just nodded and kept his hands flat on his knees. My name is Nora Calloway. I am 32 years old, and I have been married to Marcus Webb for 6 years. And I want to tell you something true about those 6 years before I tell you what happened in that waiting room. Because the true thing is the only way the rest of it makes sense. Marcus was not always what he became. I want to say that clearly. Because it is accurate, and because the version of events that makes him a monster from the beginning is easier to understand. But it is not what happened. When I met him, he was 30, funny, attentive in the specific way that felt like being chosen. Like out of everyone in the room, he had decided I was the most worth his attention, and was making that decision visible. We dated for a year and got engaged and married 14 months after we met. And for the first year of the marriage, I was happy in the way that people are happy when they have gotten something they wanted and have not yet understood the cost. The cost revealed itself slowly. That is the thing about this kind of marriage that people outside it do not understand, which is that it does not begin with the thing it becomes. It begins with small adjustments, reasonable sounding requests, preferences that seem like nothing individually, and that accumulate into a shape you do not recognize until you are already inside it. The first thing I remember clearly was a Tuesday evening in year 2. I had plans with my friend Claire, dinner at a restaurant we liked, nothing significant. Just 2 friends who tried to see each other once a month because our schedules made it difficult. Marcus came home from work while I was getting ready and sat on the edge of the bed and watched me and said, "You're going out tonight?" "Dinner with Claire," I said. "I told you last week. I've had a really hard day," he said. He said it without drama, very evenly, the way you state a fact. I was kind of hoping we could stay in. I looked at him in the mirror. He was not asking me to cancel. He was simply informing me of his preference, in the tone of a man who believes his preferences are relevant data that should factor into my decisions. "I'll be back by 9, I said. "Of course," he said. "Go. Have fun." I went. When I came home at 9:15, he was in bed, not asleep, and he said nothing. And I lay next to him in the dark and felt the specific weight of his not saying anything, which communicated more than saying something would have. I apologized in the morning for being 15 minutes late. He said it was fine, and the way he said it communicated that it was not fine. And I spent the rest of that day quietly, trying to compensate for something I could not name. I canceled on Claire the following month. The month after that, I rescheduled 3 times until she stopped suggesting dates, and I told myself she had gotten busy. He did not like my friend Claire. He had reasons. She was a bad influence. She encouraged me to spend money carelessly. She did not respect our relationship. The reasons were specific enough to sound considered and general enough that I could not find the precise place to push back. I spent less time with Claire. Then I spent almost no time with Claire. Then I stopped calling her because calling her required a conversation afterward about what we had talked about and whether she had said anything negative about Marcus, and the conversation was exhausting in a way that made the call not worth it. I gave up Claire in year 2. In year 3, I gave up my Thursday yoga class because Marcus had begun scheduling things on Thursdays without telling me, and then being hurt when I was not available. The hurt was not dramatic. It was quiet and specific, and designed to make me feel that I had failed him. And I felt that I had failed him, and I rearranged my Thursday so that I would not fail him again. The incident that I look back on most clearly happened in year 4. My college roommate's father died. I had known this man since I was 18, had spent Thanksgivings at their house, had watched him teach his daughter to drive in a parking lot on a Sunday afternoon the way my own father had taught me. The funeral was a Tuesday. I told Marcus 2 weeks in advance. He said, of course, go. And then the weekend before, he bought tickets to something, a corporate event that he described as important. When I said I had the funeral on Tuesday, he looked at me with the expression I had come to know, the one that communicated disappointment without stating it, and said, I thought this event might be something we could do together. I did not go to the funeral, called my friend from the car on the way to Marcus's event, and said I was so sorry. And she said she understood. And I heard in her voice that she understood something larger than what I had said, and we had not spoken much since. These are the things that happen. They do not happen all at once. They happen one reasonable sounding request at a time, and each one is small enough that you can explain it to yourself. And by the time you understand the shape of what has been built, you are already inside it. And the doors have been closing so gradually that you did not notice them closing. My parents noticed things. My mother was careful about how she expressed it. The way mothers are careful when they love their daughter and do not want to push her away. She said things like, Marcus seems very particular, and I hope you're doing what makes you happy. And once, very quietly, after a dinner where Marcus had corrected something, I said in front of them twice, and I had laughed it off. Both times. She had held my hand in the kitchen and said, very quietly, you know you can always come home. I had received this with the defensive irritation of someone who does not want to examine the thing being pointed at, and my mother had let it go, and we had not spoken of it again. My father said nothing for years. Jim Calloway was a man who believed that his daughter was an adult who made her own decisions, and that his role was to be available rather than to interfere. He had watched Marcus with the still, observant attention that was his nature, and he had said nothing, and I had read the nothing as acceptance, which I understood now was not what it was. Claire had not given up. I did not know this until later, until my father told me in the waiting room. But Claire had not given up in the way that I had given up on her. She had watched from the increasing distance I had created between us, and she had done something I had not asked her to do, and would have told her not to do if she had asked, which was to write things down. The things I had told her before I stopped calling. The things she had seen herself on the occasions when Marcus had been in the same room as us, and she had watched his face while he watched mine. She had a document on her laptop that she had been adding to for years, specific and dated, the kind of record that a person builds when they are afraid of being told they imagined something. 6 months before the night of my mother's surgery, Claire had called my father. She had called him because she did not think she could call me. She had asked him if she should file a report, if he thought it was the right time, if he believed it would help, rather than hurt. My father had said yes. He had said it quietly, the way he said things he had been thinking about for a long time. Claire had filed the report. It had been sitting with the department for 6 months, a formally documented record of what had been happening in my marriage, waiting for the right moment, which my father had recognized when he heard Marcus's voice on my phone, telling me to leave my mother's emergency surgery. He had made one phone call while I was in the bathroom. That was all it had taken. 6 months of documentation and one phone call, and the machinery had moved. Marcus arrived 52 minutes after I told him to come pick me up himself. I heard him before I saw him, the particular rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway, fast and purposeful, with the quality of controlled anger performing itself as urgency. He came through the waiting room doors and he stopped. There was a uniformed officer standing near the entrance. Not blocking anything, not aggressive. Simply present, in the way that authority is present, when it is making a point through existence rather than action. The officer was speaking quietly, with a hospital administrator, but he was there, positioned where he could not be missed, and Marcus saw him immediately. I watched my husband's face. In 6 years of marriage, I had learned Marcus's face the way you learn something you depend on. For information about your own safety, which is completely, with attention to details that other people would not notice. I had learned the micro-expressions that preceded his moods, the particular set of his jaw that meant he was calculating something, the way his eyes moved when he was deciding how to frame something to his advantage. I had never seen his face do what it did in that moment, which was to simply stop. Everything that usually animated it, the confidence, the management, the constant subtle performance of a man who understood that other people's perceptions were resources to be shaped. All of it went somewhere. And what was left underneath was a man who was afraid. He looked at the officer. He looked at my father, who had stood up from his chair when Marcus came through the doors, not aggressively, just upright, present, no longer the background figure Marcus had spent 6 years treating him as. He looked at me. "Nora," he said. His voice was different from any version of it I had heard before. Everything that gave it its usual quality was absent. "Marcus," I said. He took a step toward me, and my father moved. Not dramatically. Jim Calloway simply positioned himself between Marcus and where I was sitting, in the quiet, purposeful way of a man who has decided something and is done deliberating about it. "I think," my father said to Marcus, in the tone he used when he had already decided how a conversation was going to end, "there are some people who would like to speak with you." The officer had finished his conversation with the administrator and had turned. He walked toward Marcus without hurrying, the unhurried pace of someone who has time because time is on his side. Marcus watched him come. And I watched Marcus calculate and find nothing workable, which was a thing I had never witnessed in 6 years, because Marcus had always had something workable, had always been able to reframe and redirect and manage his way out of situations that would have cornered other people. There was no management available here. Claire's documentation was real, the report was real. The officer was real. My father was standing between us in a hospital waiting room where my mother was in surgery, and none of those facts were going to rearrange themselves into something more convenient. Marcus looked at me one more time before the officer reached him. The look was not the one I knew, not any version of it. It was smaller than anything he had given me in 6 years, stripped of every tool he had ever used. Just a man's face in a fluorescent-lit waiting room understanding that something was finished. I did not look away from him. That was the thing I had not been able to do for 6 years. To look directly at Marcus when he wanted me not to. And I did it now, and I held it until the officer spoke to him, and his attention was required elsewhere. The doctor came out 2 hours later, and found my father and me exactly where we had been, in our chairs, my father's hands finally open on his knees, rather than pressed flat. The surgery had gone well. My mother was in recovery. We could see her in 30 minutes. My father put his face in his hands, briefly, the way men do when the tension they have been holding releases all at once. And I put my hand on his back, and we sat together in the quiet. We saw my mother in a room on the 3rd floor. She was pale and tired, coming up through the anesthesia slowly, and she held my hand when I sat beside her, and looked at me with the eyes that had been reading my face since I was born, and did not say anything about any of it, which was my mother's way of saying, "I see you and I'm here. And you do not have to explain." I did not go back to the house that night. When the time came to make a decision, it was not difficult. My father drove me to my parents' house after. We had seen my mother, and I walked through the front door that I had walked through my entire life. And I went to my childhood bedroom. And I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling. The water stain in the corner was still there. It had been there since I was 12, and had never been patched. Because my father always meant to get to it, and never quite did. And I had found it reliable over the years, a small constant in the specific way that childhood homes hold things constant. I looked at it, and I thought about 6 years, about Claire who had documented things and called my father, about my father who had made 2 phone calls, about Marcus's face when the options were gone. I thought about my mother's hand in mine, pale and warm and present. In the morning my father made eggs the way he always made them, without asking what I wanted, because he had known what I wanted for 32 years. We sat at the kitchen table in the morning light and ate them, and when I had finished he said, simply, "What do you need?" The question was the same one. Claire had asked me 6 months ago, when she had called before she filed the report, when she had said, Nora said, "I need to tell you something," and I had said I'm fine and gotten off the phone without listening. I was not going to say I'm fine now. "A lawyer," I said. "I think I need a lawyer." My father nodded. "I know someone," he said. He looked at his coffee. "I made an appointment last week, just in case." He paused. I hope that wasn't overstepping. I looked at this man who had sat in a waiting room for 3 hours, with his hands flat on his knees, who had said nothing for years, because he believed in my right to make my own choices, who had made 2 phone calls when he understood the moment had come, and had made an appointment just in case, because he was my father, and that was what he did. "No," I said. "That wasn't overstepping." He nodded, once, and picked up his coffee, and we sat together in the kitchen of the house I had grown up in, and outside the window the morning was ordinary and unhurried, and I thought about what came next, which was uncertain and difficult, and entirely mine to navigate. Uncertain and difficult, and mine was better than certain and managed and someone else's. It was considerably better. It was, in fact, the first thing that had felt like mine in a very long time. It was a beginning. That was enough. I called Claire that afternoon from my childhood bedroom, while my father was at the hospital visiting my mother. She picked up on the second ring, and for a moment neither of us said anything, just the sound of each other breathing, which was its own kind of conversation after months of silence. "I know what you did," I said finally. "I know you do," she said. "Are you okay?" It was the question she had always asked, first. The question Marcus had trained me to answer with, "I'm fine," so that the conversation could move on to something he found more relevant. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, and I thought about the honest answer, which was complicated and not fully formed yet, and I gave her the honest answer. "Not yet," I said, "but I think I'm going to be." She was quiet for a moment. "I should have told you what I was doing," she said. "I thought about telling you. I almost called so many times. But I knew you would tell me not to, and I thought..." She stopped. Started again. "I thought you deserved to have someone do something, even if you couldn't ask for it yet." I looked at the water stain on the ceiling. "You were right," I said. "I wasn't sure," she said. "I've been not sure for 6 months." "You were right," I said again. "Thank you." We talked for an hour, longer than we had talked in years. And it was different from how we used to talk, more careful and more direct at the same time. The way relationships are when something significant has happened, and both people are navigating the new shape of things. She told me about her life, the things I had missed, and I listened with the attention of someone who understands she has been absent and is trying to be present now. She did not ask me to explain Marcus or explain myself. She simply talked to me and let me talk back, which was what I needed, which she had always understood. When we hung up, I sat for a while longer, in the quiet of my childhood bedroom, and I thought about Claire building her careful document over years, adding to it, waiting. I thought about my father, making an appointment just in case. I thought about all the people who had been quietly holding things together around me, while I had been inside something I could not see clearly. And I felt, underneath everything else I was feeling, a specific and overwhelming gratitude that was difficult to look at directly, because it required acknowledging how much I had needed people to do things I had not known to ask for. I went to see my mother the following morning. She was more alert, sitting up in bed, the color coming back into her face. She looked at me when I came in the way she always looked at me, with the complete attention that I had spent my whole life feeling seen by, and she held out her hand, and I took it and sat beside her. We did not talk about Marcus. We talked about her recovery, about the apartment my parents had been thinking, about painting, about a book she had been reading before the surgery that she wanted to finish. At some point she squeezed my hand and did not say anything, and I understood that the squeeze was everything she wanted to say, and that she was trusting me to understand it, which I did. My father's lawyer was a woman named Susan Park, who had an office downtown, and who met with me 3 days later, with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen this particular situation many times, and had long since decided that her job was to be useful rather than sympathetic, which was exactly what I needed. She reviewed what I had, asked precise questions, and told me where I stood, which was better than I had feared and clearer than I had expected. I walked out of her office into the afternoon and stood on the sidewalk. For a moment, the city moving around me in its ordinary way, and I thought about a waiting room, and a cold cup of coffee, and my father's hands finally open on his knees when the doctor came out. I thought about the look on Marcus's face when the options ran out, and I thought about my mother's hand in mine, warm and certain. Then I started walking, in the direction of wherever came next, which was mine to decide, which was the whole point, which was everything.